Thank you for pressing start on episode 52 of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcast. Today we have two secret games, followed by a review of our featured game, Operation Tango. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. I'm Bo Po, and joining me is my best friend, playing games that he recommends. He's the biggest fan of Mega Man, flipping phones after smartphones began. I'm talking about the late-night streaming, secret games scheming. Everyone say hola to DiscoCola. What is happening?
Ugh, man, Bopo, I'm a little busy at the moment. I need to change the airflow to high and set shot control to pneumatic and reset the board, but I'll be ready to go in a moment. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. My descending wire cutter. Those are references to our featured game, Operation Tango, which we've been playing on Twitch here in early 2024. It is our co-op game of season 5 of the podcast. And it was my turn to pick the co-op game. So this was my pick for our season.
We started doing co-op games back in season 4 for the first time. Well, kind of season 1, I guess.
Yeah, our first games were co-op.
But we made it a point to have one every single season starting in 4.
Yes. And we might, going forward, have situations where we actually pick more than one co-op game.
We're not limited to one, but we have to have at least one.
Yes. So, yeah, I was looking at our co-op games lists the other day that we will feature, and actually some of them are very short.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be some of those in there that would be good to sort of add into a season that already has a good, longer co-op game.
Okay.
And talking about featured games, I was looking at Twitter this past week, and I saw that Landfall Games, who developed Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, which we reviewed several episodes ago, released their final update for Totally Accurate Battle Simulator. They've been developing this game for over 7 years, just like adding more content into it. And so they have released their final major update. And so just reading from their Steam update about the game, they say, quote, "Hello, everyone. It's been a while, but we're happy to finally have the neon-inspired stuff ready for the unit creator. This update includes 20 new weapons, neon abilities, some neon headpieces, and neon colors for the unit creator. This update is the last planned update for tabs as detailed on the roadmap. We will keep track of any accidental bugs introduced in this build for future patches, but past this update, we have no plans for more content for the game. We're immensely grateful to you all for joining us on this journey over the past 7.5 years. It's bittersweet to finally be able to release this update." And they go on to thank the community and to comment on how it's grown. So I think that's awesome. And it just kind of coincided with us just recently reviewing it. I didn't know even that they were still releasing updates for it.
Who knew? I mean, other people knew, not us though.
I guess not. And it sounds like a lot of their recent updates were about unit creation, which is something neither you or I did. But I was able to talk to a fellow Twitch member about unit creation and try out their army and stuff. So I'm looking at this, and it looks kind of like futuristic with the weapons and, the glow effects that you can add to your units. So I think that's really fun. So anyway, just wanted to comment on that, touch on that, because we did recently review tabs. There's another game I want to talk about, and I mostly want to get your reactions about.
Okay.
There is a game that is a smash hit here in early 2024. It's a game I just recently learned about from our friend Big Sandwich, actually.
Okay.
He told me about it while he was streaming and while I was watching him. He asked, "Hey, do you know about this game called Pal World?" Now, we are commenting on this in late January 2024. So talking about this will probably age like milk because this won't come out until 5 weeks from now or something. But as we sit down, Pal World just recently came out. This is basically a creature collector crafting survival game that's looks to be heavily inspired by Pokemon.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've watched the full trailer yet. I don't think you've watched the full trailer yet.
I have
Is that
seen
right?
some sort of trailer, but this was like a year ago.
It was like a year ago.
Yeah.
Dang. So you've known about this for a while.
I know. I mean, I knew about it and immediately put it out of my head. But yes, I know it's essentially creature create catcher with guns.
So what I would like to do is actually have us both watch the trailer, and then I'd like to get your impressions. But before that, do you have any reactions to this game being the massive success that it is, getting 1 million plus concurrent players on Steam and being the most concurrently played game for the Steam platform? Any thoughts on that?
My initial impression is that it is essentially like shock value. It took the biggest multimedia brand on the planet and gave it guns. And so that's its whole identity, and I attribute its entire success to that at the moment. So I will go into this trailer that you're sharing with me, having said that.
Okay, well, I just found the trailer and I shared it with you. So let's take a moment and watch that, and we will probably cut out the trailer, but we'll see you on the other side. And we're on the other side of watching the trailer. That was amusing for me because I'm looking at the trailer and in my peripheral, I can see you, and I saw a lot of head shakes, a lot of smiles though. But maybe you were laughing at the game, not with the game. What's going on in your mind, Disco?
So you use the words inspired by, and I think that's a little bit generous. Some of these creatures are just Pokemon. They're just Pokemon with a couple extra little curls of hair or something. Like I saw essentially Lucario, I saw Garchomp, I saw Meganium, I saw Galarian Zapdos, essentially. To say it's inspired by is a little bit generous, and I'm totally fine with like games that are copycats that sort of have their own identity. Indie games are full of them. But I think this one treads just a little bit too close to the original material. And I haven't independently looked into some of the like criticisms that I saw about the developers online.
Okay.
But they essentially like use and promote AI art to create their stuff, as well as like sort of jack fan art and just sort of manipulate it into their own stuff as well. I haven't independently confirmed any of that stuff, but just previously I have seen allegations that previously they have done stuff like that. So I mean, I'm not really interested in Pal World personally. I imagine it's a big enough game to go on our list, so I might not have much of a choice.
It's technically, I mean, I think you could argue it's an indie game. It's just going to be a massive, massive success here in 2024. It's already sold millions of copies in just days, and I only suspect it will climb and climb from there. But yeah, anecdotally, I have seen lots of accusations of plagiarism online. I have not looked into it a ton. I've also seen the claims that the developers are very much into using generative AI, and there aren't a lot of rules, if any, on that in the game development space.
No, of course
so it's
not,
kind of just this Wild West right now when it comes to generative AI. I know that a previous game of theirs was based on this whole premise of AI. It's actually like in the name of one of their games. So I am also not as interested to try this out as I am to just see how this story develops about the game. And I think, we've got a long road ahead of us in 2024. We could see some legal action from Nintendo. Who knows?
Ooh, yeah, who knows?
Which would be really interesting. That would be a popcorn event for me.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe we'll play it someday. Maybe we won't. I'm not particularly jazzed about it, but also I understand why people are popping off for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure like all of my criticisms are reaching ears of Pokemon fans that are like, "Oh, that's rich coming from a Digimon fan." But I would argue that Digimon looks different enough from Pokemon, whereas this looks, many of the monsters look near identical. And also guns, like, come on, man. Why? Why do we have to have that? Anyways.
Yeah, I kind of recognize the similarities even as someone who doesn't consume Pokemon media myself. Like, I thought those looked like Pokemon.
Yeah.
So there you go. But we will continue on with the show. And before we move on, if you're listening to Underplayed right now, thank you. And we love you. If you haven't already, please consider giving us a follow and a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It takes just a few seconds and goes a long way. It's time for our secret games.
Secret games.
Secret games.
I know you're playing without me.
Secret games.
Well, I'm here to tell you, baby.
Secret games.
I've been playing too.
Secret games.
In Secret Games, we each reveal and review a game we've been playing on our own, secretly, privately. We don't tell each other what we're playing. I have no idea what DiscoCola has been playing the past few weeks.
A little bit of our own espionage going on.
Nice. And he doesn't know what I've been playing recently. So we will start with DiscoCola. Let the mystery be no more. Reveal your secret game for episode 52 of Underplayed.
My secret game this episode is a stealth puzzle game from Draw Distance, and it is called Serial Cleaner. Not to be confused with the sequel Serial Cleaners, which is an entirely different game.
I've never heard of Serial Cleaner. This is interesting.
All
Okay.
right. Well, you have that trailer, and you can watch that while we go on.
Okay.
Yeah, so Serial Cleaner takes place in a 1970s era world. In Serial Cleaner, you take on the role of a middle-aged man that lives with his mother, who is apparently named Bob C. Leaner. I don't know that his name is mentioned much in the game. So
I get it.
Yeah.
That took me way too long.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would have never known if I hadn't seen it written out. But yeah, I don't think they mention his name much in the game, so I'm just going to call him the Cleaner. And the Cleaner seems to be indebted to the local mob and works to pay this debt off, in part, by cleaning crime scenes for the mob, as well as a mysterious second client. And this includes removing dead bodies, vacuuming blood, and stealing incriminating evidence, all the while avoiding detection by active police patrols at the crime scenes. And so here's where I would say that this game is rated M. You could hear that and think maybe it's rated T. The game is rated M, so if you're a younger listener, just be aware of that as you start to Google it. There are bloody scenes, but it's all pretty stylized. So I don't think it's offensive, but if you are apprehensive to murder scenes, just be aware.
Yeah, it's I'm seeing in the trailer it's definitely graphic, but it's not disgusting in how much it's doing. Yeah.
Right. Anyways, in between missions, you are treated to a nice little moment at Mom's where you get to look at your little evidence trophies or maybe watch some TV, or you can listen to the radio or read some of the newspaper, or you can talk to your mom, all while you wait for the call to accept a new job. Every new job will be slightly different than the last. It may switch up the number of bodies that you have to remove, the amount of evidence you need to collect, or how much of the blood you need to clean off of the scene. And it will also change up the setting, the number of police officers, the kinds of police officers, and eventually there will also be interactable environmental elements, and the overall size of the level changes and grows as you go on throughout the game, usually getting more and more difficult each time. As you might imagine, the Cleaner slowly realizes that this line of work is becoming quite hazardous, and so this game becomes a series of just one more job until he can finally be free from the weight of the mafia debt. Now, I've played games with stealth sections before, but I have never played a game entirely devoted to the idea of stealth itself. So this was not only new for me, but as someone that mains action platformers, it's a little bit antithetical to my usual tastes. All the same, there are things I really enjoy about Serial Cleaner. I think the pace of adding new challenge elements to Serial Cleaner comes at an appropriate and enjoyable pace. The game starts with simply showing you how to clean blood and remove bodies, and it then shows you how to collect evidence while maybe adding a simple cop or two, and eventually adding moving walls, hiding spots, and cops that behave in entirely different ways, all at a reasonable pace in the overall scope of the game. And every once in a while, if it was intentional or not, I would get a level intermittently that seemed easier than the level I had just cleared.
Hmm.
So this kept that incremental difficulty increase from like snowballing into a momentum that I wouldn't be willing to deal with.
Love that.
Yeah. I really like the art style. I mentioned that this is really stylized. All of the characters and environments have these like sharp edges and corners, and I think the illustrated art is consistent and adds a lot of character. Additionally, I only learned last night about Serial Cleaners, the sequel that I mentioned, and it features a much different 3D art style, and I'm significantly like less interested in that. So extra props to Serial Cleaner for, in my opinion, its much more distinctive character.
Mm.
I think the music is good, and many tracks evoke this like stereotypical 70s setting where necessary. You get a little bit of funk, you get a little bit of disco, get a little bit of R&B. So it's all like really distinctive, stereotypical 70s sounds.
Hell yeah.
But surprisingly, my favorite thing about this stealth game is actually the story. It doesn't have a crazy amount of depth or anything, but it's delivered in a pace that lines up with the cleaner's realization of the gravity of his own situation. And on top of that, it's delivered through the piecemeal vehicles of reading the newspaper between missions or watching TV or listening to the radio. You get your story bits just through these small little pieces of words on the screen, and it's really fascinating. It feels like such an organic way to learn about your role in this huge picture when your actual active actions are more of a third party to the storyline. So yeah, it's such a simple way to tell a story, but it's really effective, and it had me looking forward to the downtime in between levels more than the actual doing the levels.
That's something the trailer doesn't tell me necessarily, that there is that story. So if I were to rank, surprises from this season of like your games that you picked, this would be up there as like
Cleaner has a story.
has a story, and I appreciate that swing and that extra depth there.
Yeah, and I think it unravels into a really cool twist that I wouldn't have seen coming if I hadn't read ahead on the trophy guide. But
it happens to all of us.
Yeah, but really cool twist, and I just love the way the story is delivered here.
Cool.
That is, however, where I have to move on. I know that doesn't sound like a large number of likes, and it isn't, but that doesn't mean that I have more dislikes than likes. However, it is indicative of something that could be considered a dislike for many, but for me, is mostly a neutral point. This game, even though it had that great story, still doesn't have like a ton of substance. I don't feel like I gained too much for having played it. And if I hadn't loved the way I got that piecemeal story elements during the game, this would be sort of a negative point. So that story really boosted this to just a neutral observation, I guess. I don't like that I can't always immediately tell which of my clients I'm talking to. I wish that there was just like a little bit more to distinguish the two callers from each other. In other games, this is done with like maybe different fonts or different visual effects on a particular font to indicate who you're talking to. So there are a few jobs in the early game that I don't totally know who I was working for at the time. Ultimately, that doesn't make a huge impact on the game until you realize, like, again, through these piecemeal story elements, who your clients actually are. It made me wish I had paid closer attention looking back.
Mm.
Another thing I don't super love about Serial Cleaner is that in many cases, the police detection seemed inconsistent at times or unfair. There would be times where I would be totally undetected, but I feel like if I did the same exact thing again, I would be detected and then lose. And I'm sure this is objectively incorrect, but it seems like that margin of error has to be pretty small given my experience.
It's nonetheless hard for you to discern what is different.
Right, exactly. On that subject of error, the checkpoint system in this game is pretty unforgiving in the sense that it basically doesn't exist. You can clean all the blood you need to clean for the level, collect every piece of evidence, and maybe safely remove 3 out of 4 bodies. But if you get caught moving that 4th body, you're starting all the way
Oh,
over.
that's hardcore.
Yeah, this
Wow.
happened to me quite a lot too. And there were 2 levels in particular in this game that were just like really brutal in that respect. Obviously IRL you can't get caught at all, so it makes sense to a degree, but good lord, like I was getting pretty frustrated at times, and there are parts of this like mostly randomly generated layout that would just seem totally impossible without being detected at least once. And getting detected doesn't automatically end your level. Like you have a chance to run away and hide and trick the police AI, but it's hard. It's hard. Lastly, I just don't like stealth games. I don't like being patient. I don't like waiting for my opening. I gotta go fast, man. The only time I've ever enjoyed a stealth section of a game was actually this is a bit of a deep cut for an indie gamer, but it's actually Transformers Fall of Cybertron. That had a
Okay.
stealth section. But every few minutes you have to do like this you execute a sentry robot.
Okay.
And you get this like cool execution animation.
Okay.
And so it was rewarding me every couple of minutes just to keep me interested.
Yeah, there's
and
something
that-
cool there waiting for you at the end.
Exactly. So it rewarded me for being stealthy,
So,
something I don't enjoy.
So did you go into this game sort of knowing, stealth games aren't my thing. I really have to push myself to try to like this? Or were you really just not sure if you were going to like a stealth game and you were more open-minded?
So I hadn't really categorized it as a stealth game. Like it
Okay.
very obviously is. But I was coming into it thinking, I'm going to play a game where I clean up a crime scene. That's pretty neat.
Gotcha.
That was
So you kind of discovered what the genre was along the way.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much. So anyways, I had seen a little bit of serial cleaner gameplay before, and I was captured by the concept and the art style. Trying it for myself more than 5 years later, like those parts of the game actually do hold up quite well. That art style and the concept are really neat. However, this confirmed something about me that I didn't really need confirmed, and that is that I struggle with impatience, especially in video games. Stealth games are always going to be a struggle for me, though I still plan on playing more because I know somewhere out there there's that perfect Cult of the Lamb, Goldilocks combination of genres somewhere out there that will include stealth mechanics. As it stands, though, for my impatient self, Serial Cleaner is a game I wanted to beat, but I'm done with it after that. I don't need to do all the extra stuff. For DiscoCola and for the kind of game it is, Serial Cleaner is just barely a 7.0 out of 10.
Okay, 7 out of 10. I'm really happy you gave a stealth game a chance because I don't know that we've played many, if any, stealth games on this show. I've only played a few over the years, but I love this concept of you're a cleaner. You're essentially playing like Harvey Keitel's character from Pulp Fiction, like the wolf, the guy who cleans up the crime scene. And also like Mike from Breaking Bad. You're just you have the thankless job and it's like highly stressful. In the trailer, I see all these features like movie-based levels and drunk mode. Were you able to try those? Are you able to speak to like the movie references or any of the additional modes?
No, I didn't really try any of them. The movie modes are in-level unlockables, so you'll be playing in the normal game, and you can see an optional collectible, which just looks like a movie reel. And then after you collect that, you will be able to play that level from the main menu. I didn't try any of them, and I can't recall off the top of my head which movies were referenced. But pretty recognizable titles.
Okay.
I recall reading.
I think it's a cool idea. And, I'm always interested in like Easter eggs and references and things. So I might look up what movies are referenced here. And then you mentioned part of the story or part of the game being like hanging out with your mom.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do that in gameplay at all, or is that part of the story in a major way? Like I'm just curious, like what is Mr. Leaner's mom like?
She's just mom, man.
She's just mom.
She doesn't know what you're up to.
Okay.
She's just a sweet lady. I think you actually do have to talk to her every single time in between the levels. Like you can skip the newspaper, you can skip the radio and television, but I think you do have to talk to mom every single time for it to actually trigger the next day's phone call or whatever.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And where can you play this game called Serial Cleaner?
You can play it on Switch, Xbox One, Linux, Windows, iOS, macOS, and I played it on PlayStation 4. And Bopo, I do think you would enjoy trying it. I don't know if you would ultimately love this game, but
I do appreciate that there's that story, which makes me more interested to try it. Just looking at the trailer, it looks kind of like an arcade game, which I'm fine with too. Like,
Yeah.
I'm fine when games just have like a fun quirk and you instantly understand what's going on, and let's see how well you can stealth in this mission and can you get through all the levels. I'm fine with that. But the story intrigues me and the setting and time period intrigue me. So I might be interested. Yeah.
all right.
It is time for my secret game. My secret game is probably actually not going to be a huge secret to you because you know that I played it.
Oh.
My secret game is Venba.
Oh, okay. I did know that you played it.
So I know you've probably seen the trailer, you know about the game, but I just sent you the trailer.
Rock on. Okay, I'll check it out.
Venba is a 2023 narrative cooking puzzle game developed and published by Visai Games. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, Venba is a short narrative cooking game where you play as an Indian mom who immigrates to Canada with her family in the 1980s. Players will cook various dishes and restore lost recipes, hold branching conversations, and explore in this story about family, love, loss, and more. End quote. So you were aware that I played this because I told you at one point I wanted to play Venba as either my last game of 2023 or as my first game of 2024.
Yep.
My original plan was last game of 2023. And then New Year's Eve hit, and I was really busy that day. I had lots of stuff going on, fun stuff. I just didn't have enough time to fit in Venba. So I decided to make it my first game of 2024. I played it on New Year's Day, 2024. I replayed it to mostly to get the Platinum Trophy. So I kind of played it twice on PlayStation. And more recently, I replayed it on PC on Steam.
Interesting.
Just because I wanted to experience the story again, and it had been a few weeks. So I got all the achievements on Steam as well. So I've played through this game three times.
3 times. Wow.
So it is a short game. It was very easy to do that. But in this game, there are 7 chapters to the story. Each of them take place in different years from 1988 to 2017. So we're spanning about 30 years as we look at moments from the lives of a Tamil immigrant family. And the story is focusing on Venba, her husband Pavelan, and their son Kavin. And this family has immigrated to Toronto from India. And when we begin the story, Venba is a school teacher and has a tough time adapting to this classroom in a new country. And Pavelan is also challenged with finding a steady, well-paying job. And at the beginning of the game, it's just them. One day, when Venba is tired and sick, she decides to start cooking from her mother's old recipe book, and she makes idlis, which is a kind of savory rice cake. And the recipe book tells you, the player, the ingredients and the steps. This is where you're starting to understand how the cooking works. But the book is old and used, and some of the directions are smudged or maybe even torn out of the book. So you have to infer some of the recipe based on context clues. And sometimes the characters will talk about the recipes too. And so you're understanding their thoughts on the meals and using that to help yourself cook. And so this is when you're doing puzzle solving in the game. Anytime you cook in this game, you're sort of interpreting diagrams and following through. Each dish is different. You eventually cook dishes like putu and biryani and uttapam as examples. And going back to the beginning of the story, it turns out Venba isn't feeling well because she's pregnant with her and Pavelan's first child, Kavin. And so then they start discussing the difficulties of their new life in Canada, but also how they could grow new roots there and live a life they couldn't have back in India. And as we go through all of the years, we are exploring the joys and the tribulations of this family, their hopes, their dreams, their life decisions. It is a story of generational differences. So as Kavin grows up, he becomes influenced by North American culture. And you get to see how his views of the world differ from what his parents expect of him. And one standout example of this is how Venba and Pavilon notice that Kavin is picking up English from his friends and using it at home all the time. That's all he wants to speak. It's what he's comfortable with around his friends. And Venba can't even understand him when he's home with her because he's not speaking Tamil. So again, this is a story spanning 30 years or so. So you get to see a lot of developments and a lot of change with these characters. And along the way, you're cooking dishes of Southern Indian cuisine that thematically tie into where the story is going. So it's everything from what dishes are cooked to who cooks them and even how they're cooked. And now, here's what I really liked, nay loved about Venba. Pretty much everything. Much of what I applaud about Venba is its touching story by Abi, who is the designer, programmer, and writer of this game. The story in Venba transports you to a particular time and place for a few hours to understand more about a few perspectives. The experience of being an immigrant, the beauty of Tamil culture, the richness of cooking South Indian cuisine. It is a story about a home and a family. It begs us to ask, how do we define a home? Is it just a place, or is it the people with whom we make it a home? Is it the things we learn, the friends we make, the jobs we have? Is it all of these things? Is it none of them? It is about how we associate food with memories too, how we eat stuff that our family makes when we're young, and then we grow old and that taste can carry into adulthood. Or maybe not eating some of the food our families made makes us curious later on. But then Venba is also about the tragic parts of being an Indian immigrant. It is about how this family is misunderstood, how they have trouble communicating with people that they're around, and also how they encounter racism and violence. This game is about loss and how we experience loss ourselves, and even how we experience others experiencing loss. So I found the story to be authentic. It is both heartfelt and heartbreaking. I cried playing this game, and I don't remember the last time that happened for a game we reviewed on Underplayed. I'm sure it's happened.
Often you have said I started to tear up, but you've never said the words "I cried."
I shed tears playing this game. It really got to me, and I think a lot of that has to do with how the storytelling happens. It's not just the beautiful story, but it's the way the story is told. This game trusts the player to understand subtleties. Sometimes you see something in this game and you don't know what it means until it's given more context later, and then it lands with an even greater impact. Mm-hmm. And there were times where I was just gut punched by what happens with this family. There are touches you pick up on too. There are text bubbles where all the dialogue occurs in this game. And you pick up very quickly that English text is in yellow while Tamil is in white. And so when Kavin is speaking, a lot of his words are yellow. And you notice that Venba and Pavilon are asking him to speak more in Tamil. And you just notice, oh yeah, their text is white. So that's just a really simple way to communicate what language they're speaking. And then each time you cook a dish, there's this little touch of all the cookware and all the ingredients flying into the scene, and they all sort of like make noises and plop down. And sometimes different characters cook different meals. And depending on who's cooking a meal, that cookware and ingredients might fly in and land on the counter with a different sort of personality to reflect the character or personality of the person cooking. Mm-hmm. So that's a nice little touch too. I love the soundscape of Venba. The soundtrack represents all these sounds from many years of Tamil music history, which is appropriate because, again, this is a story that spans decades. So we're listening to all kinds of music from the radio while they're cooking. And I love the sound effects in this game. They are painstakingly accurate. There's the sound of the dishes on the counter. There are lots of metallic sounds. A lot of this cookware is stainless steel, and you get that feeling through the sound. And when you're actually cooking, there's the crackle of ingredients boiling in oil. That really sells the delicious vibe of the food. So I want to give a huge shout out to Neha Patel, the sound designer of Venba. Along with the sound, there are the visuals, and the food is colorful and steamy.
Yeah, making me hungry.
Everything about this game is so clean too, like just the way the characters express themselves so thoughtfully. And I don't need to hear their voices to understand everything that they're feeling. There's a lot of emotion through the body language and through facial expressions. And then the gameplay of cooking the dishes themselves, each one feels particular and special according to whatever moment we're in this family's life. Opening up that recipe book is giving you a handful of puzzles as you try to deduce how to use all the ingredients. So I just find that gameplay idea really great, especially when it's married so closely to the story. When it comes to dislikes, I don't really have dislikes. I have just nitpicks.
Okay.
Just two nitpicks that I could think of. One is that sometimes during conversations, there are branching options of what to choose. So a character might have two options of either something to say or something to ask. And because I played through this game several times, I did try out all the options. And I found that both options in every branch were always interesting and added helpful backstory to this family. But some people will only play this game once and they won't get one of the options. And so I wish all the information was just given to us. This feels like kind of a focused story, like a particular story.
Right.
And so I don't see why we can't just be given all that information throughout the whole journey that we take. So it feels like maybe the branching conversations didn't always feel warranted, especially because we're not doing like a choose your own adventure style to the story. Another thing is that I just wish some of the dishes had a bit more complexity to really get at the puzzle aspects of cooking, especially at the beginning of the game when Venba is rediscovering her mother's recipe book.
Right.
You get the sense that a lot of these recipes are like nearly forgotten, and this recipe book is tattered. It's
seen better days.
It has, and so maybe there was more of a potential there for figuring out the recipes, maybe going through trial and error and sort of showing that reconnection to her place of birth a bit more. But overall, Venba made me want to immediately do two things. One, call my mom, and two, try my hand at cooking biryani. And those two things alone are testaments to the beautiful story and the mouth-watering visuals. But on top of that, Venba has a masterful soundscape, both in its sound effects and in its music. I was transported playing this game. I had no hesitations playing through it 3 times, and it is a story I'll carry with me for a long time to come. I'm going to rate it a 9.5 out of 10.
All right, that was pretty close. Okay. I guess because you have played it multiple times and in different ways at this point, what is your recommendation to a player that has several options? I imagine, looking at it, that the cooking part in particular is a lot easier on PC, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest difference is, are you going to play with a mouse and keyboard, or are you going to play with a gamepad? And I guess you could play it with a gamepad on PC too. I didn't find the differences to be staggering. You know what I mean? So like, I think you'd be fine if you're a console player. Just, you wouldn't feel necessarily remiss playing it with a gamepad, in my opinion. It's just sometimes with the mouse, it's easier to click on different ingredients. And I don't know that I have a strong preference either way, though.
Okay.
But this is a good reminder that I forgot to say that it's playable on PC, which is where I played it the 3rd time, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 5, which is where I played it the 1st and 2nd times, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. Curiously, not PlayStation 4. I don't know why the game isn't on PlayStation 4.
It's just PlayStation 4's time,
I guess so.
We're being phased out.
But it is on Xbox One, so that just makes me curious about why that last generation of Xbox was included.
Who knows?
I don't know. It's interesting, though.
Well, anyways, accolades abound for Venba from all kinds of different people. And yeah, from what I've seen, I love it. And I love the art style is very distinct and has a lot of character. And I do look forward to playing this someday.
And then also just on this game, what I love about this game is that it's just very successful at generating empathy in the player. And playing this game reminded me of a famous quote by the great film critic Roger Ebert. Have you ever heard of Roger Ebert's quote about movies as like empathy machines or empathy generating machines?
Might
about
have.
that?
It's very faintly ringing a bell.
So even though this is a video game and not a movie, the same idea kind of applies here. And so his quote on this idea of basically art generating empathy, but when it comes to movies is, quote, "We are all born with a certain package. We are who we are, where we were born, who we were born as, how we were raised. We are kind of stuck inside that person. And the purpose of civilization and growth is to be able to reach out and empathize a little bit with other people, find out what makes them tick, what they care about. For me, the movies are like a machine that generates empathy. If it's a great movie, it lets you understand a little bit more about what it's like to be a different gender, a different race, a different age, a different economic class, a different nationality, a different profession, different hopes, aspirations, dreams, and fears. It helps us to identify with the people who are sharing this journey with us. And that, to me, is the most noble thing that good movies can do. And it's a reason to encourage them and to support them and to go to them." End quote. So I thought that applies to a lot of indie games too.
Yeah, we've seen that a good number of times, just in Underplayed.
So I think that the Venba is a testament to that idea that art can do that. I do highly encourage everybody to play Venba. It's only like a 90-minute experience.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a short game, maybe 2 hours. So I think everybody could fit it in, and I think it's probably the most important game of 2023, one of the most important games of 2023. So yeah, those are our secret games, Serial Cleaner and Venba. Let's move on to our review of Operation Tango. It is our featured game. So Operation Tango is a 2021 co-op adventure puzzle game developed and published by Clever Plays. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, "It takes two to save the world in this cooperative spy adventure. Pair up with a friend as agent or hacker with only your voices to connect you and work together to bring a high-tech global menace to its knees." End quote. I want to briefly mention that it says it takes two there. And we were kind of chuckling about that when we were streaming this game because there's a trophy called It Takes Two.
It Takes Two.
Turns out this game came out only like 2.5 months-ish, maybe 3 months after It Takes Two.
Oh, it came out after. I thought
came out
I
after.
assumed it came out before.
Yeah, it came out after It Takes Two. It Takes Two was like late March 2021, and this was like early June 2021.
Geez. Okay.
So that year we got a couple of co-op, pretty high-profile indie co-op games. But this is an espionage-themed cooperative game where we're each seeing different things, and we can't see each other's screens. So it's less Cuphead / Overcooked, and it's more keep talking and nobody explodes.
Yeah.
The game is played in the first-person perspective. There are two roles, the agent named Angel and the hacker named Alistair B. Fleming. And the player playing the agent runs through the levels on foot. The player playing as the hacker gives and receives information and often kind of explores this digital interface and selects a lot of stuff in a UI and is doing a lot more digital focused things. And each mission has a brief cutscene describing what we're about to do. There are 6 missions in this game. In them, we are doing things like breaking into servers, intercepting communications, stopping runaway trains, defusing bombs, etc. And each mission has multiple different objectives and thus different gameplay going on throughout. So, for instance, in the first stage, we are riding on an elevator and then we're hacking into a vault and we're deactivating lasers and then we guide the hacker on the server access map, and we descramble a key to a safe containing a virus genome. So a lot can transpire over the course of just one mission. You're not doing the same thing for a whole mission. And the heart of the gameplay is describing information. DiscoCola and I were describing lots of shapes and colors and numbers and directions. There are lots of IP addresses we have to put in. And this is where I'm going to play the first sound bites that we have to offer from what it was like to stream this game on Twitch.
Virus genome. Oh, I see. Got it.
Yes. Okay. This is a different pattern than we had last time, I think.
All right.
So you're going to fill in 2 horizontal lines.
Okay.
One of them's in column 2 between B and C. Oh, connect. Oh, I can see what you're doing. I see.
Okay.
And then the other one's just to the right of it between B and C in column 3.
B and C in okay, got it.
That one. And then the vertical line that's in the middle of them between columns 2 and 3. Go ahead and highlight that one.
Okay.
Yes. Then you're going to do 2 diagonal lines. They're basically 2 rows below the lines you just drew horizontally. So one of them is in D2, going from the top left to bottom right.
Yes.
And then the other one is D3, going from top right to bottom left.
Okay.
So right there, that illustrates how just giving the directions, you can kind of sound crazy.
Yeah.
You kind of sound like you clipped that moment from the stream and you called it, "We sound like crazy men."
Yes.
And I agree wholeheartedly with that.
What are you guys even saying right now? What is happening on that screen?
I know.
Yeah.
So like if you were, as a third party, if you were to just drop in and listen to us, we wouldn't make any sense because I'm seeing something very particular and so is DiscoCola. And again, we did stream this on Twitch. I wanted to describe what we accomplished in Operation Tango. So what did we do? What was our schedule like? And how did we accomplish the tasks in this game?
So the plan was we play through the whole game in the same role, and then the next time we play it, we would swap roles, assuming we had finished the game the first time. We did do that. The first time we streamed, we finished the game in about 5 hours or so.
I think it was like 4.5.
4.5 hours. Okay. And then the second time we swapped roles. So we had a little bit of memory of maybe some of the information that we were being fed, and we were able to apply that to the order of operations we were now seeing for the first time. So first time we played, I was the agent, Angel, and Bopo was the hacker, Alistair, and then we swapped. So I was the hacker the second time, and then Bopo was the agent. And then we had a third stream that we hadn't initially planned where we played the challenge mode. And in the challenge mode, you go through 10 sort of mini missions. They're not that many, but they're little mini missions. And you get ranks based on how quickly you complete those missions. And we played through all of those, getting gold rank in all 10 in about 3 hours or so, I believe. Yeah.
It was pretty efficient. They only take a few minutes to complete, but some of them we tried, many times.
Several times, yeah.
And when we were doing that replay of the base game, there was that that sort of easier time we had because we were now seeing the other side of the game. The previous playthrough was still fresh in our mind. We were making new comments about the game, and this is where I'd also like to just play another soundbite of us sort of commenting on the randomization of the game.
Rad.
Last time they were both on the wall.
Yeah, they were.
Nice.
Spectre.
I like that things are randomized in this game. It's not always the same.
Yeah, that would be boring.
I was actually worried about that.
Well, I figured after, given the number of times we died, and then those things reset and were random, I figured the game would just be random.
So that was a relief to me that the game wasn't just like a rinse and repeat exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just kind of painting the picture of what it was like to play it once, then play it again. And now DiscoCola, we are a little bit removed from playing it together on Twitch, but it's still fairly recent in our minds. What are your thoughts on Operation Tango?
My overall thoughts on Operation Tango. Thank goodness this is a co-op game because I don't know that I would enjoy it quite as much if I hadn't played it with my best friend.
Oh,
And while I recall being frequently frustrated while playing the game, watching our VOD back after the fact, I actually had a ton of fun.
nice.
In fact, I found myself like much more glued to our VOD than I was getting my notes done for today's recording. I was just like so drawn to it. I was just like, oh man, we're great. I
Yeah.
love us.
Yeah, we're a great team. I agree.
So, if I may do the greatest distillation a little bit early, you should totally play this game with someone who is just totally on your wavelength, someone you trust. I think there are maybe 5 people on the face of the planet that I could have played with to complete this game. But I'm super glad I got to play it with you, Bopo, because I think you understand the nuances of how my unfortunate brain describes things better than anybody else. Next, and maybe the coolest thing about Operation Tango, is that things feel pretty balanced. I think overall, at the end of the game, it is easier to play as Angel, in my opinion, but missions 1 and 2 feel really balanced as far as who has to do more work, whereas mission 3 feels like Angel is doing the hardest work, and mission 4 definitely has Alistair as the star. And mission 5 is largely balanced, but I think that Angel has a slightly easier time in mission 5 as well.
Yeah, it sort of all adds up and balances out by the end.
Pretty close, anyways. I think the music is really successful. I don't think it plays really well on the radio, and it's rare for me to mention music that doesn't play well on the radio. But I think that the music does a great job of supporting the action on screen. So props to making me tense and clenching multiple body parts when I needed to. I think that each level has a really distinct identity. It's sort of like the different zones in Unsighted or Hyperlight Drifter. Mission 4 is the Sayonara Wild Hearts level. Mission 3 is the train level. But it also doesn't feel like it's a totally different game because it's shaking things up from level to level. You're taking on multiple identities in this game, but this game's identity is mostly consistent from start to finish. And this makes it just a little bit more immersive. I become invested because I'm learning things that will come up again, but I will also encounter things I've never seen before. I'm learning on the job, just like you do in real life.
It is a great mixture, and the game sort of foreshadows things you'll do later with some earlier tasks that are kind of easier versions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And going from the base game to the challenge mode, we saw that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
We would look at something in the challenge mode and we'd go, oh, that's just like mission 2 from the base game. Yeah.
Right, yeah. I think the difficulty curve moves at a mostly reasonable pace. There are some tasks that I think don't really match the difficulty of the rest of the level. But overall, I think the easiest stuff is mostly at the beginning, and even after switching roles and seeing the end of the game, the greatest struggle comes mostly at the end of the game, regardless of whether or not you've seen it before. Lastly, as scared of it as I was initially, I actually really enjoyed the challenge mode. Like I mentioned in our Celeste episode of Underplayed, it takes, in my opinion, what are the strongest parts of the game and focuses on that in lieu of trying to support a story. Additionally, this mode has its own sense of progression that is really satisfying, though this could be only experienced from Angel's point of view, possibly. So even though I said during our stream that I didn't really want to swap roles, I think I would actually love for you to see how the challenge mode facility itself shows progress. So I might be willing to swap roles with you after all, if you're interested. Just, I don't want to do it on a timeline. And I don't necessarily want to do the race, but I just kind of want you to see the facility for what it is.
It's interesting you say that because I still feel like I understood the layout of that place and that I saw everything you were seeing.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm going into security cameras and I'm controlling a cleaning robot and I'm zooming around the floor that you're walking on and I'm controlling that drone and flying around in the first person. And I'm actually seeing like places that you don't have access to because I'm going into vents and stuff. So I feel like I saw it and I connected all in my mind. I just saw it usually from like different perspectives, like from a camera way high up or like a drone way down low.
hmm
So
Whereas when I immediately start challenge mode, mission 1, I'm seeing a part of the facility that looks superfluous, but is actually somewhere we get to in mission
Later.
7. And
okay,
it's
way
just
later.
off
Yeah.
to the side. So it's like
Yeah.
there's this really cool progression that's building. And I feel like you get a greater sense of it when you're playing as Angel.
Okay. Okay. I might be down for that. Yeah.
As for dislikes, I only really have about 2 things that bug me. First is that when playing as Angel in particular, you do have little margin of error with your hitboxes. When I'm navigating through a field of lasers as Angel, it seems like my butt can just trip off one of the lasers in an almost unfair way. This does extend into Alistair and his sentries that he's meant to avoid, or even taking control of one of the cleaning robots and avoiding lasers there.
Yes.
So I think the game has great timing and puzzle mechanics, but as far as being a physical entity exploring a world, there's a little bit left to be desired there, I think.
Sometimes what you see, you feel like your butt's hitting the laser or whatever, and you don't really have the perception that that's possible with where you're standing. Sometimes on my side, it would look like you were closer to the laser than
Right.
you thought you were close to the laser.
And I feel like if you're going to have one of the perspectives be more accurate, maybe find a way for the person that's actually in the lasers to be
Sure.
more accurate.
And that was mostly in the challenge mode
Yeah.
where we dealt with that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And then I know I was just praising the puzzle timing, but at times the game's requesting timing that can be just a little bit too stressful to be fun. Like, yes, you're up against an internationally wanted hacker. There should be stress and painful time limits. But at times, in particular Mission 4, the game asks a lot of you. And whereas the more challenging bits of Mission 5 will have like a forgiving margin of error for selecting solutions,
Yes.
Mission 4 will have a much slimmer margin of error on top of a much greater punishment for failure.
I think if there's any level out of the 6 that feels like it could be removed and put into another game and it would make sense being in another game, it would be Mission 4.
Yeah.
That has a different personality and just overall difficulty.
Yeah, basically,
compared to the
yeah,
other
it's
ones.
just super stressful. Overall, generally, I tend toward games that can be played by oneself when needed, like last season's co-op game Cuphead. However, Operation Tango can't be played solo, but I did still have a lot of fun playing with my best friend. And if I hadn't, I don't know if I could have enjoyed this game nearly as much. I don't think that Operation Tango is a great 3D game, but I do think it is an awesome co-op game. And then it adds a challenge mode that is surprisingly satisfying. Weirdly, I had a surprising amount of fun watching our VOD when compared to when I was actually playing it. If you play it and you are a streamer and you know of a way to get you and your partner's stream on the same screen, I highly recommend that. I think that would make for the perfect playthrough of Operation Tango for a lot of people to watch. Anyways, I had a lot of fun. My butt getting tagged by lasers and being caught by drones does a decent amount to hurt my score. But in the end, I give Operation Tango a DiscoCola 8.0 out of 10.
8 out of 10. That's what I would have guessed for you. Wonderful. As you were talking there, I was wondering if you were looking at my notes because I said some things like almost verbatim the same that you did. But I have to say, how dare you self-criticize in that way where you say like, I'm not good at delivering information or communicating, whatever you said there. Because like I felt the same way about myself. And there were often times where I thought, man, Disco is so much better at just calmly describing what he's seeing than I am.
Oh, I don't know about calmly.
Well, it doesn't seem like you lost your temper a ton. You know, you were collected, I think, in a lot of it. But I will say Operation Tango offers a perfectly fun evening of cooperation with a best friend. And that's definitely like what I got here. Both times we played through the main game. I think the game is a perfect length. It took us a little over 4 hours to finish all 6 missions that first time. So I think that's really digestible. no mission lasts too long, in my opinion. This game really moves
Mhm.
for me. Part of that is us just, communicating and making progress together. We are putting in work to make that happen, but we're also not getting stuck for hours on end on one mission and then wanting to just abandon the whole thing. So I think it's a really good length, and I think it's a mostly appropriate difficulty for a lot of the game. There is how different each mission feels too. I love that there are some tasks that repeat over the course of the campaign, but that also each mission has its own big idea with unique mechanics. It's easy to reference things in this game, like you said mission 3 is the train mission 4 is the Sayonara Wild Hearts level. That's exactly what I wrote down here. I love using verbose language to over-explain what I'm seeing. I feel like I'm a very annoying partner when we play, but I also want to paint that picture for you, and I want to get a picture painted for me too. And so I love when we can trade turns doing that.
It's like we're troubleshooting what we're about to say in our head before we say it. Like, how can I dummy proof this as much as possible?
Exactly.
The little triangle feet are pointing upward on both sides.
Yes. And sometimes I get the beta version of what I want to say out preemptively, and it's too confusing, and then I have to adjust what I'm saying. So I was always so curious about what you were seeing that I wasn't too. When we finally did our swapped roles second playthrough, much of the game ended up being drastically different than what I imagined too. That was so interesting to rediscover the game with a completely different perspective. So the imagination of what the agent was like in that first playthrough was sort of a meta game I was playing as well. Like while we were playing Operation Tango, I was also having a lot of imaginative ideas about what you were seeing, and I was usually like really inaccurate with what I was picturing.
I sort of had the same thing in particular with the create the tile puzzles to avoid the sentries.
Yes.
I was very curious about what that was about. As well as the quarantine thing where you have to reference
Blue wall. Yeah, turn left.
I had
turn right.
no idea what that would
know.
look like for you.
I don't know how I would have described that. And inversely, I didn't know what you were seeing. Like I assumed you were looking at a computer screen, but I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know like how limited your information was. And so sometimes I have to over explain things. I have to tell you things you already know because I don't know what you know.
Right.
And so it's just it's a game that makes us over-explain things, and I find that really amusing. The challenge mode is where I felt really smart in this game. I felt smart in a lot of the base game, even the first time we played, but when we did the 2 playthroughs and then moved on to the challenge mode, those 10 levels are where I felt really smart alongside you. All 10 levels are set within that same facility, and we're progressively seeing more of it. We're seeing how all these areas connect. And I thought there was a well-paced continuity to that place. And then the game intentionally trips us up in humorous ways. I think of the stabilization panel when we're each standing at a stabilization panel and you have buttons that are particular to you. I have unique buttons and I get instructions. Sometimes they're things you have to do. Sometimes they're things I have to do. So I start reading instructions and I'm like, DiscoCola, flip the switch or set the color to red. Oh, crap, that's mine. And so I'm like telling him I'm giving you orders to do something, not immediately understanding that I'm supposed to do something.
Exactly.
So I like that they thought of that, how could we potentially trip players up without overly frustrating them, just to help them, communicate and try something new. So there are moments where you learn to take turns, like giving those directions back and forth, and I really like that. And then I have several dislikes. I think a big thing for me in this game is I just wish the game had a bit more personality. I think this game is really fun to play, but I wish the game itself had more fun with itself. Does that kind of make sense?
I know exactly what you mean.
Like Angel and Alistair, the characters we play as, they don't have any dialogue or lore or background given, but I feel like they could have a story.
Yeah, so they're the silent protagonists, but they don't give you anything to immerse yourself in that role exactly. It feels like they have an identity, you're just not given their identity.
Exactly. I think they're really cool looking people. Like they're
Yeah.
cool visually. They seem really competent. I want to know more about who they are as people a little bit. Maybe if they could talk a little bit at each other, that would be really interesting. Now, I also get that once we get going with missions, it is hard to insert voiceover and such, right? Because we're talking to each other. So the game has to kind of shut up and let us talk.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we could get more of who they are through the cutscenes before and after the missions. Maybe the agent who's talking to us, maybe she has a personality and a character and a backstory too. I don't know. And I also didn't get a strong sense of who the villains were. There could just be more there about both the heroes and the villains. This game is not always the most challenging. The risk of failure can feel pretty low. So I'm not always as fretful about what we're doing as with other co-op games.
Mm-hmm.
I think because the game has lots of checkpoints and it is like relatively easy, I think that does aid the flow of the game. Like we can keep making progress and that feels good. But on the flip side, you have like plenty of time to stop the train. I'm not feeling stressed out about stopping the train.
Right.
When we're defusing a bomb, there's not a timer on the bomb. There's just don't make 2 mistakes or else the bomb will blow up. And so we can really take our time and talk it out. Even though it's framed as this thing that's really urgent, it actually isn't as urgent as it appears. So I kind of wish the stakes were higher in some moments. And then there are mechanics that don't always feel well tuned. I'm talking specifically about controls on a gamepad, like when you were selecting lines on the descrambler, you were having a lot of trial and error there, just trying to select the diagonal line that I wanted you to select. And I was perfectly fine waiting, but just that could be faster. Selecting Windows as the agent when the hacker's on their way to the Cypher server, that Sayonara level. Sometimes just selecting the windows and they can all kind of feel different.
Yeah, they don't. Your R stick doesn't go where you want it to go, and you forget that that's what you need to select, and then your D-pad's doing something different. Yeah.
And then I also think of crafting an EMP charge as the hacker. Basically, any activity that requires turning a dial can feel imprecise with that stick. And one of my biggest frustrations in this game was when we were playing the cleaning robot mission. I think it's mission 5.
5, yeah.
And I got the cleaning robot stuck.
Yeah.
After going through a little door that's only meant for the robot. I got stuck on the floor. I had flipped over and I couldn't right myself. And we had to reset the level.
Yeah.
And that really killed the flow of that particular moment, unfortunately. But overall, Operation Tango is a game that always has us doing something different. It could have a bit more personality to get me invested in our missions. But those missions have us speaking word salads at each other. And that amuses me. I like using language back and forth to not only decipher a code to a door, but also to imagine the things you're seeing and doing. I loved playing this game with you. This might seem like kind of a lower score than you were expecting because I was pretty hyped about this game. But, this score doesn't mean I didn't have fun. I'm going to give this a 7.5.
That's actually higher than I anticipated.
Okay.
As you were going. So
wonderful. I had a great time with you playing this game.
I had loads of fun.
Mhm.
There are just like very obvious things that I just didn't do well as in terms of like performance and stuff. So
And when there are so many different activities, that can happen with just every player has different skills going into it. You're naturally going to be good at some things. I'm naturally going to be good at some things. And I'm also naturally going to be bad at lots of things and vice versa. So there are missions I definitely admire more than others. Mission 5 for me was one that I found truly outstanding when it comes to sheer variety of what you're doing. That is the level with the cleaning robot that got stuck. But that's just one thing you're doing. You have the laser grid. We have the stabilization panel. We also have descending down the shaft with the blowtorch. And we have the evidence room in that level.
Oh, the evidence room is still in that level.
Yes.
Goodness.
That level is so diverse with what it has.
There's a lot going on in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I feel like there are a few levels where we have to rely on each other anywhere near as much because particularly in going down the shaft, there's a section where you have to use your blowtorch to cut some wires. We'll just call them wires. They're not wires.
They're like bars.
Yeah,
metal
bars.
Yeah.
But if you cut them in the wrong place, they'll trigger an alarm. But you, as the agent, can't see where you need to cut them, so you have to rely on the hacker to actually like do something physical instead of like relying on the hacker for something on a computer. You rely on each other so much in that level.
That moment of going down the shaft when I was the hacker the first time, that was like a clear example of me just straight up not listening to you because you were telling me parts of these bars can't be cut. And I didn't even understand that you had a blowtorch. That's how confused, that's how lost in the sauce I was in that part. Because I was still like getting used to like, I was either rotating you or making you descend. I can't remember which.
I think you rotate.
Rotate and go lateral directions. And so I was getting used to that. And I was like, why is the shaft heating up? Why is it heating up? It's because you have a blowtorch.
Yeah.
I wasn't listening to you. That's why. But we did much better at this level on our replay because we didn't brute force the answer at the end with the evidence room.
Yeah.
We actually did figure out how that worked that second time. Whereas the first time, we kind of just guessed things until we got it right.
Yeah.
So here's another soundbite. This is when we did solve that final room on our second playthrough. So here's what I don't get. If I have a locker number, I've got to be able to do something with that. Why would it give me a locker number and nothing else? Because we've got to cross-reference our information back and forth till we find out his identity.
Yeah.
So like, what about this tells me what I need to tell you? 34. I can tell you it's a handgun. I can tell you it's black. It has like a white dot on the side of it. That's all I know.
So the other column of information I have is the reference index. I don't think that shows up anywhere on your side. Go back to your data and see if you have anything that says WY645.
I have a reference index number W. Ooh. Are you alphabetical?
No, I'm not. I'm by
WY645.
Yep.
Aguilar. Inspector Aguilar, May 19th, 2035. Crime type creating malware.
Okay, creating malware. Crime code SFF.
SFF. Reference indexes. Oh, Alejo Vega. Handgun and a True Touch 4 phone is what they have. A handgun and a
4 phone.
You should be able to sort by like models. True Touch 4 phone.
Okay.
Alejo.
Here we go.
I'm not sure how to proceed with this detective work.
Locker 67.
That's 2 away from my favorite number. 65. Okay. Hacking tool. What's the passcode?
8751.
Invalid code. The device's passcode. It's from your security footage.
Security footage. Yeah, that's what I wrote down. It's 8751.
8751.
Yeah.
Locker 65?
Or
no,
67.
My bad,
your
my bad.
joke faulted you.
It did. I went to the wrong locker.
Hey,
Nice.
hey.
Oh my God! What did we miss last time? Did we just not?
I don't know. Dude.
What did we miss? I don't even know.
Your joke faulted you.
It did. And like, I guess despite my goofy fumble at the end, though, it was really impressive how much faster we did that.
Oh yeah, that took us a long
It took us
time
like
first
15,
time.
20 minutes
Yeah.
the first time. So I just thought that was humorous, though. My mind was mush by that time. Like, my joke faulted me. So we play this game once. We play it again to see the other side and get the platinum trophy, which was awesome. And then we played the challenge mode and got all the DLC trophies. But you brought up an interesting idea before we started recording today. What would you go back and do differently if we were just like, we wiped our minds, we started this game again? What would you do differently to either communicate or just play the game differently?
I think that there is just, I don't know, maybe there's just like a level of description that I still failed to provide at times. Like, I think we got to a point where we sensed that there were a lot of superfluous things And so we sort of like trusted that a little bit more than we should have.
Mm.
And maybe that there are not as many superfluous items as initially we might have thought or had been trained to think.
Okay. Are you thinking of like when we're describing one of many shapes?
So in the first, this might have been the second mission, there's a lot of like elements, especially from the hacker's point of view, that you just don't have to touch. You have access to a lot of digital systems that mean nothing. That trains us that there are things that we will explore but don't need. Then we get to our evidence room, and there's almost nothing actually that's superfluous there. Like you need actually every column. And I think the first time we played through, we did treat one or two columns as if they were irrelevant. And so
Yeah, I think we had been conditioned to that point.
Yeah.
To just expect we're not going to need all this stuff.
Right.
And that becomes really apparent in the challenge mode when the hacker has all this UI and only some of the things are accessible. But the more you play those challenge levels, the more it all opens up, but you still only use a handful of things in every level. So I think part of that is us just not staying curious. That is something that is our
Mhm.
fault. But I also think the game conditions us to think that way.
Yeah.
Uh,
How about you?
I'm trying to think of like how I could communicate things better to you. And I guess like I would not repeat myself so much because I guess like I didn't always know how far along you were in selecting a shape or drawing in a line or
Right.
entering a code. So sometimes I would just repeat it just because I thought maybe that's helpful for you because Disco's not saying anything. What could the harm be in just repeating it again? But that could have been distracting. I don't know.
It wasn't horribly distracting.
Yeah.
No.
But that's what comes to my mind when you say superfluous is like, what was I doing that was superfluous? Like
Right.
not necessarily the information I was perceiving to be superfluous, but how I delivered it. So I think I could have been just more efficient in a lot of ways. There are parts that I found vague and extraneous. I think you would agree. There is mission 4 where we're doing the Sayonara Wild Hearts style level.
Yep.
And we end up doing this thing where we collect data.
Ugh.
Do you remember that?
Yes. I was hoping we would talk about this at some point.
Let's listen to our last soundbite here. This is called Why Does This Have Data?
All of its data to unlock
Oh, this thing. This is so weird.
Oh, yeah, this dumb.
I don't get the point of this. This is just like a little game we play.
Yeah.
It's like playing an It Takes Two minigame. Whoa, this looks different. Okay.
I don't remember what I press. Oh, just X. Okay. Really pressing that cross button.
We are. I love how you can hear all the clicking.
Easier data.
At least there's not like a trophy attached to this or something, because there's like a
I know.
competitive angle to it.
It just feels like this should have stakes to it, like there's a timer or something.
Yeah.
I don't get the sense there's a time limit or anything.
Right.
And also, to me, when I press on one of them, it doesn't collect right
Right.
away. Sometimes I have to like triple click.
Yeah. The game could afford to not have that part, I think.
So what other moments did you find vague or maybe just like not explained super well?
The tiles that you have to create for Alistair, I think that there is no good way to describe as Alistair what you're seeing. There's like no reference points for you to create blocks in some cases. Particularly when you get up into the ceiling. Because as Angel, you can't see Alistair when he's up on the higher elevation.
Yes.
And so for Alistair to then explain where you need to place a tile so that he can jump down, there are no like landmarks that the agent can really like decipher from in most cases.
Yeah.
So you kind of just have to like learn it together, learn an order of operations together and trial and error. I think that could afford to adopt some of that blue wall sort of
Interesting.
mentality.
Yeah, just creating more of a reference point. I think that particular example is a moment where the game is intentionally tripping us up in a humorous way because as the hacker, I assume you can still see me when I go up into the ceiling. And I think it's pretty soon after that where you go, wait, where are you? Or did you leave this place? And I'm like, no, I'm still here. And so I guess like, I feel like that's a very conscious decision of them. And I think it's kind of demented and mean. I guess what I was scared to do, listening to you do it as the hacker, when you were doing the hacking tool, or when you were doing the password breaker with the ones and zeros on the train.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
I had no idea what you were seeing, but you're putting in a sequence of ones and zeros, and then I am told how many you got right, and I just tell you. So I have the easy job in that case.
And it's supposed to be like the game password, but it's not done well, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. There aren't that many combinations, so that's another thing you can just kind of brute force, which is nice.
I basically did, essentially.
And then there's this hacking tool with the keys and locks. Like we're moving the teal and orange blocks.
Yeah.
I thought that was a cool idea, but we get later in the game, and do you remember how the screen gets like really large with like tons of pins?
And you only need to move like 2 of them.
Yeah, you only need to move 2 of them. So I thought like there was this unnecessary cluttering of pins all over the screen. It's like, whoa, is this going to be like a level 10 uber hard challenge? No, it was actually arguably easier than some of the earlier ones. It's just all this extraneous stuff on the outer edges. So, and then our favorite activities. I had a couple of these. I liked going through the antivirus quarantine sequence with the blue walls.
Mm-hmm.
That was fun to figure out because all I could do was rotate, and you were looking at the screen with like all the rooms with the blue doors or the blue walls, and playing through that the second time, it all clicked into place because that was one of the times where I was so curious about what you were seeing. And it ended up being kind of simpler looking than I thought.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite activity?
I liked the in Mission 5, what do they call it? The panel? The
stabilization
panel.
Yes.
I loved the stabilization panel.
Nice.
I loved defusing the bomb.
Yes.
And I loved the end of the train level.
Those are some of the ones I wrote down. I wrote down stopping the train with all those different panel activities.
Yep.
I didn't write down stabilization panel, but it's the same idea kind of as stopping the train. And then the bomb defusal, even though I kind of criticized that for not being as stressful as it could be with like a countdown.
No, I agree.
It was still really fun to communicate back and forth on
Absolutely.
that. It's still
getting to the bomb. That's a different story. Didn't much care for that part.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And then I don't mind being the hacker on Mission 4, where you're like on the path to Cypher's server. I think being the agent is a little bit tougher of a time.
It's tougher in different ways for sure.
Yeah.
It's just harder to control.
Yes.
The screen is working against you.
Right.
As the hacker, I only found difficulty when the little like sentries were coming up behind you. But other than that, I did have a lot of fun being the hacker in that level as well.
One area of the game we haven't really commented on yet is that moment leading up to the bomb defusal of scanning all the people, all the network node stuff. Thoughts on that area? Because that's one of the places where we spent the most time.
Yeah, even the second time, still not very clear. It's just, I don't think your goal is clearly communicated, or not your goal. Your goal is clearly communicated, but your path to get there, the information that you do have to give to each other is kind of nebulous.
Yeah.
And has a lot to do with like computer words.
Yes.
That might not mean anything beyond like, I connect to Wi-Fi sometimes.
Yeah. You know the goal, like we have to get to the bomb so that we can defuse it. But how bomb?
Yeah.
Where bomb?
How get?
How get? And so it's not like an A to B situation. We have to go from A to G or whatever, so what are all those steps to get there? And so it felt like we were doing things in that progression without knowing why we were doing them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It just, I don't know. Nebulous would be a way to describe that.
Yes.
Section.
And then there's this self-consciousness of, are we wasting our time?
Mm-hmm.
Are we just completely missing the boat on what's...
I'm a big old dummy, and I'm missing one of the important categories here again, like we did in the evidence room.
Right. Yes. Well, that makes two of us. I also felt that way. Well, anything else to say about Operation Tango?
I don't think I have much else to say. Just let me know if you want to swap roles in challenge mode. If not, that's also fine.
Okay.
Scheduling co-op gameplay as an adult in your 30s is a little difficult. But
yes, true that. But this was our co-op game for Season 5. It was my pick this time. For Season 6, it will be DiscoCola's pick, and I'm very curious about what you will choose from
me
our
too.
list.
I have no clue.
You haven't picked it yet.
Haven't
but
even thought of it.
We'll find out later this year. But for now, that is our review of Operation Tango. You can play it on PC, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. DiscoCola rated it an 8. I rated it a 7.5. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed and on common podcast platforms such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg. Our art comes from Onimochi. Underplayed is on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at UnderplayedPod. You can find me in those places at Bopo. That's BO_PO. I'm also on the GG app, where you can see my game lists, such as all the games that I've finished in 2024.
And I am at DiscoCola on Twitter, Twitch, and most of the other platforms, though I don't really use them much. You can also check me out on the GG app, where I have what is essentially just my wish list, but it's games that I don't want to forget so that I can play them for Underplayed. And you can also catch Underplayed on many more platforms, such as Twitch at Underplayed Podcast. You can find us also on Facebook, and we post our episodes on YouTube as well.
Next time, we'll have 2 more secret games to review, and our featured game will be A Space for the Unbound, an adventure game developed by Mojikin Studio. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.